Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back down to the basement. I have been watching the new Disney Plus series Hawkeye, and I know the Ronin sword has been in Endgame, but for whatever reason, I didn't really want to make it then. It also doesn't have a whole lot of screen time, but in the first couple episodes of the Hawkeye series, you get to see the Ronin sword a lot better. So I used some screenshots from the show to get a better version of the sword, and so I made that this week, and I will show you exactly how I made it. It's all foam, as always, and hope you like the video. Alright, so we're going to start with the handle of the sword here. So what I got here is I just got the pattern cut out into the thickness of foam. I ended up changing some of these on the pattern for you guys just because it was a little bit too thick, and my original plan was to have the blade be two pieces of 10 millimeter, but that made the blade a little bit too thick, so I had to make the handle a little bit thinner. So like I said, I marked that on there for you guys. So it's just going to be the base of the handle is going to be a 10 millimeter, and then the other side is going to be a 5. And that's pretty much the only difference. So like always, I'm using contact cement and just applying that to both sides of my pieces, and then when you stick those together, it is permanent. So after that, that's the first skin piece there, the 2 millimeter, and really all that piece is doing is just adding a little bit of thickness and giving you that little design cut out in the back there. And then on top here is some 5 millimeter, and this is cut out to shape. Ignore those marks on the front there, those little boxes. Those don't end up making it to the final thing. It's something that I thought I saw on the picture of the Ronin sword, but I think it was just like it was grooved, and it kind of, it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell from like looking at the show images. And then these little pieces here, they go on the back, and they get rounded out, but it's a lot easier just to cut everything out as squares first. You can kind of see the pen mark where it's rounded, and the blueprint itself is rounded. I cut them out straight just because it's easier to go through when you're done, when they're all glued together, and then cut the corner off and then round it out with a rotary tool. It's a lot easier than trying to match everything up when you're gluing, because no matter how good you cut, it's always going to be a little different than the other one, and you're always going to have a hangover. So here's the blade. It's obviously a little bit longer than my floor mat piece, so I had to cut them in half and glue them together, which isn't ideal. It gives you a seam that you kind of have to try to hide on a shiny surface later. But it's what I had to do, so that's what I did. Then I go through and I mark out these squares where these get cut out. You can see there, like I was saying earlier, I originally was going to put another piece of 10 millimeter on the back of this, so I have that like ready to go, but I ended up not using it. Now I kind of cut the pattern apart here so I can mark this edge. So I mark the edge, then I turn the blade over, and I'm using this 5x16 dowel, wooden dowel, for the like the skeleton of the blade, just to keep it more rigid than this piece of foam would just be really floppy. So I mark where I want that. It's also important to make sure you put the blade, not the blade, make sure you put the dowel down far enough onto the blade where it's not going to be where your square cutouts are. So I go through with my knife here and I'm just cutting a groove out. I go through with the Dremel later and just kind of round it out a bit. Then I'm putting some super glue in the seam. And then you put your dowel in there. You can see how I cut the squares out first before I put the dowel in, just to make sure that it's not in the way. It's kind of hard because you got to get it in the middle so it's not behind the squares, and it can't be down too far because you're going to be rounding the blade off in the front there to make the edge, but you can do it. Then I'm just taking my rotary tool here and I'm just sanding the dowel flat so it's level with the foam, just because I didn't want to put another groove in the back of this 5mm foam for the backing of the blade. So I kind of marked where the blade would be, and then I put contact cement on both sides, obviously, and then it was easier for me to put the blade on top of the 5mm and then with extra, so then you can cut it off to make it as straight as you can. So like I said, it's a lot easier to cut everything when it's glued together than trying to match everything up while you're gluing. Things have a tendency of getting pulled and skewed when you're gluing down, but if you glue a little bit extra, you can just trim it with a sharp knife, and you're going to be sanding it anyway, but it just gives you a nice straight surface to start with. So after I glue the back on, then again I go through and I cut the 5mm backing where these squares are. They hold their shape, but they obviously they're going to be floppy if you push in on them, because there's no structure there, but they hold their shape and you don't really have to worry about it. So then I'm taking a sharp blade and I'm just going through and I'm cutting off as much as I can of this edge here. I like doing that instead of sanding it all with the Dremel, just because that's essentially that would all be dust. So if you can get your mark and you mark down the middle of the edge, you can kind of cut right up to it and then just kind of clean it up with your rotary tool instead of trying to sand all of that. So now I'm going to go through and use my knife here and score these detail lines. And these get scored all the way around the top, and then on the back side of the blade too. And then I go through with my heat gun, and I heat up where I did those cuts, just because that's it pulls all of the it like basically shrinks all the molecules of the foam together, and opens those cuts and gives you like nice panel lines. Now I'm going through and I'm putting the blade guard on. This is just a piece of 5mm foam. I used the pattern to mark exactly where I wanted that to be. And then I just go through and I just stick it on with the contact cement. And this wasn't like cut to size beforehand. I intentionally made it longer so that I could cut it off exactly where I needed it. I actually got really lucky with the scissors there. I actually got it like right where it needed to be. That pretty much never happens. So now these are the handle guard. Just a couple thin strips of 2mm foam, and they'll get glued on to the very back of the blade guard. Now this is a little detail piece that goes on the front. It's like this little horseshoe thing. That's 2mm foam. That gets glued right up there on the front. Now these little screws I made with some foam clay. I made like little balls, and then I used like an Allen wrench key to push into them to give you that like Allen wrench impression. And then I just let them dry overnight, and I just glued them on after. Now these handle guards on the side here, I was using my what the heck is it called? Soldering iron. There you go. Got it. I'm just going through with this little flat detail piece attachment for this soldering iron, and I'm just going through and I'm just adding these little grooves. This is pretty time consuming, but it gives it a good detail at the end, and it really looks like the grips. I'm going through with Plasti Dip for this handle piece here. I ran out of black Plasti Dip, so I'm using some gray. If I had black Plasti Dip, I literally would have been done at this point. I could have just painted the handle with black Plasti Dip and then been done painting, but that's alright. So now I'm using some rapid fill here for the blade. I like using this rapid fill stuff because it's flexible when it's dry, and you can sand it. So you kind of brush it in, you kind of scrub it in, and you're really, what it does is it fills in the foam gaps that you can't really even see with your eye. It fills all those in. I put 2 layers on, so it fills in all those little gaps, and then you can go through with a really high grit sandpaper, and you sand down your brush marks basically, and you can get like really smooth foam that way. So I like using this stuff if it's gonna be something that's supposed to be metal or be smooth or really flat, because Plasti Dip you sprayed, it gives you like those little sometimes it leaves like that texture, that little bumpy texture. So you can see how smooth that is after you sand it and buff it. So after that, I go through just a can of metallic silver. Rust-Oleum makes really good metallic colors. Their gold is really good, and their silver is really good. You can actually see that has like a reflection. You can see the reflection in my hand. That's why I really like that rapid fill stuff, because it can give you really good flat surfaces to give you a nice shine later. So now I take that handle, I go through with just some black acrylic paint, and I'm just painting the whole thing black. I go through later and I paint the screws with the silver. The guard, the blade guard, and the hand guard, they get painted black too. Then I go through with some brown, dark brown, a little bit of black, watered down, and I'm trying to mostly just rub that into the grooves of the blade, just to darken them up to make them stand out. But I also kind of weather the blade itself. I think silver blades and like silver stuff and metal stuff in general look way more realistic if you weather them. It gives it that little bit of extra detail. So now I'm using some of these. These are for like model kits and like terrain things. I've used them for a little bit of model kits here and there, but what I'm doing is I'm just taking some of that silver and I'm just rubbing my finger on it, and then just brushing it along some of the high sides just to give it a little bit of weathering on the handle. And then you can pop that on there and glue that in place, and that is pretty much it for the blade. So it's a pretty fun build. It looks really cool. I'm glad I made it for my Marvel wall, and hope you guys liked the video, and I'll catch you next time.